A significant number of Christians remain single against their wishes because they haven't met a suitable Christian partner. For them, the commands that Christians should only marry Christians can be one of the hardest in the Bible. If a New Testament believer married a non-believer, this would have caused a scandal both inside the church and outside, because in the Roman world, a husband and wife had to share the same religion. If a Roman woman married into a family that honoured different gods, she had to worship them too, because if she didn't, their children could not be Roman citizens. This was a big issue in Roman society, where it was a virtue to honour all gods, but it was a huge problem for Jews. To make sure they weren't pressured to worship other gods, Jews were only allowed to marry other Jews. Their divorce certificates reflected it by saying, "You may now marry anyone you wish, but only a Jew." Being of the same religion was especially important when children came along. How could both parents go to the temple and make an offering to get the priest's blessing for their child if they worshipped different gods? This is probably why the Corinthians worried that children of mixed marriages hadn't been sanctified. Paul himself assured them they needn't worry. God himself sanctified their children. All this means that we shouldn't be surprised when Paul clearly says that the believers should not be yoked together with unbelievers. Although this phrase could possibly refer to a business relationship, in this context it's unlikely. Greeks and Jews normally did refer to marriage as a yoke, and they called a divorce unyoking, even in legal documents. Elsewhere, Paul is unambiguous when he says she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but he must belong to the Lord. Here he's using the Christian equivalent of the Jewish phrase we saw, but only a Jew. He's addressing widows in this passage, but there's no indication that other believers are different in this respect. Christian teaching on mixed marriages, therefore, reflected Jewish teaching in its efforts to fit in with the Roman culture. However, it was different in one important respect. Christians weren't allowed to divorce a partner simply because they had a different religion. Paul said that Jesus' teaching on lifelong marriage applied just as much to mixed marriages as to marriages between believers. Like most early churches, there were couples in the Corinthian church where only one partner had become a Christian, and some of those believers felt they should divorce their non-believing partners. But Paul taught that marriage vows were lifelong in God's eyes, and divorce should not be sought without biblical grounds. Does this teaching about marrying only Christians apply today? Well, there are two tests for a timeless command. First, it's one that doesn't change through the Bible. And second, it's likely to stand out against the culture of its time. So, is this command in agreement with the Old Testament? We might think at first that the ancient Jews were taught to marry only fellow believers, because kings were told not to marry multiple wives or foreign princesses who might entice them to another religion. Individual Jews, however, did marry foreigners without any hints that this was wrong, though they were not allowed to marry women from the enemy nations of Palestine. For example, Moses married two foreigners, a Midianite and a Cushite. And two of the three women named in Jesus' genealogy were foreign. Ruth was a Moabite and Rahab a Canaanite. But it wasn't until Ezra's time that there was a campaign to prevent intermarriage with all foreigners. So this rule does change with time in the Bible. Our second test is whether the command was simply reflecting the culture of the time, or whether it's standing against it. Endogenous marriages, that is, marriage within tribal groups, was very common in the ancient world, and it's this that created and maintained the distinctiveness of different tribes and nations. Marrying within the same religion was also important, and even more so in New Testament times, so the rules about intermarriage were certainly influenced by the culture of the time. And all this suggests that the command to marry only fellow believers may not be timeless. So, in this case, we should ask, what was the purpose of those original commands? The warnings in the Old Testament imply a danger that intermarriage will result in pressure to change religion. Does that apply today? Yes. It's no longer an expected requirement that couples should share the same religion, though their lives can certainly be easier and closer if they do. Now, as in New Testament times, there's likely to be friction between partners who do not share a love for Jesus. However, now as then, they might be won over by the genuine witness of a Christian lifestyle. One thing we can be certain of, God recognizes the validity of marriages between a believer and a non-believer. And he loves both the children and the non-believing partner, just as much as the believing parent and partner loves them. God bless you.